Welcome to Hard Knock Life. I'm Keith Chow.
I'm Britney Monet.
What's up, Brittany? It's just me and you. It's like old times.
I know. Yeah, well, for those who have followed both of our podcasting, I guess, careers together, will know that, yes, we used to do DC TV Classics, sometimes just me and you.
Yep. So here we are again. Just me. Dominic is taking the day off. Jamal is taking the day off. And Sean is on his extended hiatus. One day we're going to get the whole crew together. But for now, It's just me and you. And it's a weird time because, like, no WandaVision. I almost feel like we have nothing to talk about because all we've talked about the last 9 weeks was WandaVision.
Well, there is a little bit. If you watched Assembled, which is basically the making of WandaVision, I don't know, since it was titled WandaVision, season 1, episode 1, WandaVision, I feel like they're going to give us just 1 hour behind the scenes of all of the Marvel shows.
Yeah.
Or whatever the first season is, and then the next season will be, that's what I'm thinking they're doing.
Yeah, I think so too. I think Falcon Winter Soldier is only 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And then there'll probably be another Assembled, like episode 2 of Assembled comes out after Falcon and Winter Soldier. And then there's like a week. And then Loki comes out. And then I think you're right. There'll be a Loki making of special. But what did you think of the WandaVision? It was like having the special features on Blu-ray, right?
Yes, which we talked about that last time, which is like things that I love and look forward to. I really liked it because some things that I thought the first 2 episodes was a laugh track and not a live audience. So to find out that they actually treated it like it was basically a show being done in that time period, that they actually like had a live audience, and so it is actual people laughing and genuinely reacting to these moments. So I think it was really nice to find out that little like nugget.
And even more, they not only had a live audience, but they had period specific lighting and camera lenses. Even the crew dressed as if it were the 50s, the audience dressed as if it were the 50s. So they really tried to immerse the actors and the crew in that time period to make that show. And you know, I think I talked about this before you joined the podcast, but I actually preferred the sitcom stuff to the MCU stuff in WandaVision. So like those first 3 episodes for me was like the high point. And just kind of see the love and care and craft that went into making those homages to classic TV. That was really cool.
Yeah, and I it was really funny because I've watched all these episodes with my youngest brother, and me and him were both saying when we were watching the first episode, this feels like Twilight Zone. Yeah. And we're like, but there's no, like, they straight up said that this episode is influenced by the Dick Van Dyke Show. So to watch the making of it, and they said, well, we decided to like use different like camera angles and transitions and like little certain cues that they did on the Twilight Zone. So it was also paying homage to it, you know, which they made before, but I was glad that they mentioned it in the making.
And I think that was what was so, for me, evocative of those particular scenes, like the choking scene in the first episode and the beekeeper scene in the second episode, is that because it was so immersed in the classic tropes of 50s and 60s sitcoms, the 4 cameras, the static sets, that when it did switch to like more dramatic lighting, to like close up on the actors, you felt it more, right? Yes. Like that scene where she's like, stop it, and he's choking to death. Yeah. Was like very creepy, but it was creepy because of how faithful the rest of the episode was to the classic 50s sitcoms. That was like perfect. It's actually amazing that WandaVision wasn't originally supposed to be the first MCU TV show. You know, like in the original schedule, Falcon and Winter Soldier was supposed to come out first.
Oh, yes, and then Hawkeye, I think, and then it was going to be WandaVision, I think.
Yeah, WandaVision was like way out in the future because it was going to lead into Doctor Strange, and like for whatever circumstances, it came first, and it only makes sense because that story could only be told in a television format because it's such a love letter to TV. Yes, it only makes sense that was the first TV show, so it was just kind of like a coincidence or like kismet, actually, that became the first MCU show.
Yeah, I really, like, we talked about briefly since I wasn't with you guys every week talking about it. I really enjoyed WandaVision. Like we said last week, I felt the finale kind of fell a little bit flat, but I think that's when you realize that that's when they were affected with COVID, because when you see them working on the later scenes is when you actually see the crew wearing face shields and masks. It's not in the first couple episodes. Right. So, you know, how much did that alter maybe what they wanted to do? And, you know, that could be part of it. I don't know.
And I think that was actually revealed this week, the director Matt Shackman and the writer Jack
Mhm.
Schaefer was on different podcasts talking about what they had done originally and what they couldn't do because of the timing and COVID. Like there was a much larger role for Monica, Jimmy, and Darcy in the finale originally
Uh-huh.
that they weren't able to like actually do because of COVID. And that's unfortunate because I think, those three characters in particular, but especially Monica, get kind of like,
The short end.
right in the finale. And knowing that they had planned all these things and couldn't do it. Because I think I read somewhere that episode, the finale, was shot just like 2 weeks before they put it on Disney Plus. So it was a tight turnaround.
I mean, that makes sense because watching it, like, and I know it's in the Disney family. It really felt like one of those like decom movies that I would have watched as a kid and been like, yes, this is amazing and wonderful. Like it really had, like, the last episode really felt like it was like a Disney Channel original movie and not like Marvel Studios production. If like people know what I mean. It really felt something like, Phantom of the Multiplex, or like it had that type of feel to it. But I in a way I still like it because it's also paying homage to like Disney on TV, even though it's a movie. Like it felt like it was also kind of paying homage into that,
Right.
especially their costuming too.
Yeah, you can kind of take it that way, that maybe this was their, every episode was some sort of nod to television, and the final episode was a nod to like classic Disney Channel production.
Because that's what it looked like. Or like even Halloween Town, like Agatha's costume was very much like, Caliber and all of that. I think that was his name, Caliber. It felt very much like in the essence of like Halloween Town and Phantom of the Multiplex and things like that. Like, but still, I really liked it. Just really seeing like Lizzie getting to like talk about how, when you go to school for acting, you learn all these different styles of acting, and then you don't always get to use them unless you were doing theater. Like she was true. If you are an actor who's gonna end up being more in front of the camera, so the different styles of acting you don't really get to do. So she was like, it was fun because I got to do them every week, and like that training is still somewhere inside of you. Like from an actor's point of view, I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah, no, and I love just how committed they were to the bit, right? Like to me, the reason those first 3 episodes work as well as they do is because they fully committed to making a 50s sitcom, a 60s sitcom, a 70s sitcom. And, because a lot of the commentary I saw when those episodes premiered was like, this is corny. Why I wanted to see a Marvel show. What is this? Like, not, and I don't want to go into the territory of like, just, it was too smart for people don't get. I don't want to go into that territory, but I think there was an expectation of a Marvel Studios show. And if you get like 30 minutes black and white, like Nick at Night sitcom, I can see how that was off-putting to people.
Oh yeah, and that's.
But I loved it.
I feel like it also shows like who grew up watching Nick at Night and who didn't. Like I watched it, and obviously you did too. Like I used to like it for me. Like all that stuff came on at like 2-3 in the morning. So like I was like 7, like but pretend to go to sleep so I could wake up to watch Bewitched, and like. That's what I literally would do that. And like sometimes my mom's like, why are you always tired? And I could
well, that's what's so impressive, again, the commitment to it, that they went full on. And we're just because if you really just step back and look at those first few episodes, they actually work as a single sitcom episode. Like, you know what I mean? Like you take all of the Marvel stuff out. If it wasn't like Vision and Wanda, if this was some alternate universe where it was a sitcom about a witch and a robot who were trying to hide their, which is a very high concept sitcom for that era. Like they did that stuff. Like you mentioned, I Dream a Genie, Bewitched is very much in that vein. It totally works. And that's, again, I just hats off to the commitment.
Yeah, I really feel like the concept, they did it and they executed it very well. And like you said, because of the COVID restrictions that they both, the director and creator, revealed that hindered certain people's storylines at the end. Like I feel like they really did what they wanted to do, despite like, yes, the little setbacks, but overall they really did commit to this. And I think something that Kevin Feige has always talked about when doing the Marvel projects is like, yes, it is a comic book / superhero movie, but I want to make each movie feel like they can exist in a different genre. Like he says, like the Ant-Man movies are supposed to feel like heist movies, and they do. I really like that they commit to like, okay, well, this is going to be this type of genre, so we're like going to live in that world too, as well as it being a comic book, and I think that's what sets, I think, Marvel apart too, is that when they say this is gonna be a film in this type of genre, it is that type of genre, despite it being about superheroes and, you know.
And ultimately, what I think appreciate coming out of WandaVision and then seeing how they made the show is like an appreciation for those two characters. Because, you know, truth be told, I didn't really give a shit about Vision or Scarlet Witch in the movie. Like, they were fine. Right? Yeah. Like, but I didn't go into Endgame going, oh, I wonder what happened to Wanda and Vision. You know what I mean? But, like, now, after 9 episodes, I gotta say, like, they may be some of my favorite characters in the MCU now.
I agree. Like, we knew just because of, like, how strong, powerfully Wanda is, we knew that she was one of the strongest characters in terms of power and skill set. But now to actually have her flushed out, and then for people to see how talented Elizabeth Olsen is, because she is so talented. I really like the movie with her and Aubrey Plaza. They're in this one movie together, and they're both just so good, and they're just so fun to watch together. For people who maybe don't check out indie films or like, you know, like for people to see that Lizzie is actually really talented, it's nice that people are seeing that. And same thing with Paul Bettany. I thought it was really funny when he said that when Favreau called him, he wanted a very like boring voice, and I'm like, Jarvis. And I'm like, but his voice isn't boring. His voice is actually very nice. And
well, he's become quite sexy, that voice, over the last 9 episodes of WandaVision, especially. Well, the funny thing about Vision too is that he was real cool at the end of the show last week, but then now with the making of, and we see what he really looks like under the makeup, I think he's less cool. He's the blue-faced Paul Bettany is actually quite the nightmare fuel, I think.
Well, it's very funny because they talk about why, like, in order for certain things to show up the way they did on camera, the things had to be certain colors on set. Right. So that's the only way to make him look like he has his normal color scheme is if they made him blue. And like it's just very interesting to see how like they did certain things, or just to see him with ears. Is like, oh, yeah, that's the thing. Like, I always assume he wore a headpiece.
It's weird, right? Because that you would think that's the easiest thing to not have to CG out is put like a little headpiece on. But you know, these wizards who do CGI can do anything at this point.
And props to like most of the special effects department, at least for WandaVision, being like predominantly women, or at least the ones that we got to see in the making of it being women. Like, because I think it's assumed that that's something that only like guys do.
Right.
So it was really cool to see like women actually talk about it, and like it was really cool.
I recommend anyone who has any kind of curiosity about how shows are made, how movies are made, to check it out. It's an hour long, so it's a pretty substantial documentary. Like if this was on the Blu-ray, I'd be totally psyched because as we said last week, I love behind the scenes featurettes and you know, lately over the last few years, when you get Blu-rays, they kind of cut out so many of those things. Like they used to have all these special features that they don't have anymore. So to have like an hour-long documentary about the making of a show is so rare nowadays. So it's cool that Disney Plus is providing that on its streaming service. I want to say also, like, I can't believe that our whole episode last week was centered around WandaVision and Raya the Last Dragon. And I didn't mention on the podcast, at least, that there's a great show. I think I didn't mention because it's hard to find. But there's a great show on Facebook Watch. Believe it or not, Facebook has its own streaming service. Anyone who's watched the Red Table Talk knows about it. But they have other shows. And they did a show a couple years ago called Sorry for Your Loss, starring Elizabeth Olsen and Kelly Marie Tran, about grief and loss. So it was basically, you know, Raya and Wanda in a show together. So I can't believe I didn't mention that when we had a whole episode dedicated to those two actresses last week. But so there you go. Check out Sorry for Your Loss on Facebook Watch if you can, to see Kelly and Elizabeth Olsen acting together.
My thing is, like, I just hate Facebook, that I'm just like, do I even want to like add to like their whatever? But point. I've heard just so many people say how like wonderful that show is. So I'm like, maybe I have to suck it up.
I know. They need to put that on some other service.
Yeah.
So, no one watches TV on Facebook. Come on.
Like, most people don't. That's why I'm just like, when are they gonna put it on like somewhere else?
Because you know the Jada Pinkett stuff, people aren't actually watching the episodes. They're just watching the clips that people post on Twitter.
Yeah. Exactly. I only see the clips of it, so I'm just like.
Well, so since it's only the two of us, we're gonna switch it up a little bit and then just do Nerd Poppin' for the rest of the episode. So I'm going to talk about what's Nerd Poppin' for me later because I actually got a chance to see the Snyder Cut, and
nice.
I want to talk about it. But before we get to that, I want to know what's Nerd Poppin' with you this week, Brittany.
So I have been reading the High Republic era novels for Star Wars. So for those who maybe don't follow the novel world, it is the same universe as we have known, but it is actually 200 years before the Phantom Menace. So basically the Jedi are really like high esteemed, and the Jedi in this period are what we have been told the Jedi are supposed to be from like
not those trash not those trash people from the prequels, right?
Like yeah, basically. And the only character that you know, because he's just so old, who exists is Yoda, but Yoda is on a sabbatical right now. Reading it, so he's only mentioned in like passing of like, you know, people like, oh, like Master Yoda, but he's not around. He's off doing his like own thing. So far, at least where I'm at, there's 3 books out, and a kid and a legitimate like children's like simple like that one is good. I've heard if it's hard for you to keep track of all the characters and you want a visual of what they look like, since it's a little like actual illustrated book. Can't remember what that one's called, but the first book is called The Lie to the Jedi by Charles Soule. So if you are into comics, you guys know he did a really good Daredevil run. He actually wrote my favorite She-Hulk comic series.
And didn't he do some of the Marvel Star Wars books?
Yes.
When they relaunched the line?
Yeah, and he's also done and so his book basically is setting up like the event that you are going to be following, that is basically kind of like slowly they're starting to see that there is a dark side kind of like growing. And so the first book introduces you to different characters, which if you also remember on Disney Investors Day, the one they had like streamed it for people and they were making all the announcements, one of the shows that I think it's the Acolyte show, that one is supposed to take place in the last 50 years of this era. Like they're basically building this world for people who are super into like, you know, being like, I gotta read everything. The Lie of the Jedi basically sets up this tragic event that you kind of start to figure out that maybe it wasn't an accident. And then the next book that I read, which is by Justina Ireland, is a Black woman writing Star Wars, which is amazing. That one is more like I would say is more appropriate for kids who are like 12 and up, but it's also still a good read. And it's about these group of kids who were on a cruiser that they were able to get off before it was like destroyed. And they get stranded on this like planet, like this jungle planet, and they're trying to figure out how to get like rescued. And it's the youngest Jedi Knight. She's 16. Her name is Minestra Rao. I think she's like the same species as Barriss, if those who watched the Clone Wars and stuff. Yeah. She's actually probably one of my favorite characters so far. And then I'm currently reading by Claudia Gray, who has actually written a lot of Star Wars novels, if you like them, is Into the Dark, which is about this young Jedi Padawan named Reith, who he is more into like studying and learning about like all the theories and all the cool things about being a Jedi, but not so much into like being in the action of stuff. And he gets thrown into the action stuff, and he's like, this isn't for me. And he's like having like a life crisis over this, and it's really good so far. You get introduced to so many characters. It's such a fun read. If you like Star Wars and you like novels, like they're worth reading. Yeah, I have a whole bunch of other Star Wars novels that I need to read, but
right, yeah, no, it's cool. I mean, and the whole project is cool. Like, you know, it was I think it was called Project Luminous a few years ago. Like they actually gathered all of the Star Wars authors, like Charles Soule, like Justin Ireland, like Claudia Gray. That name sounds familiar. She wrote the Leia book. That came out like I think right around like Last Jedi, or
I think it came out right around Last Jedi. Finished reading it before I read these ones, and it is Leia, Princess of Alderaan, which is about Leia before she basically accepts being the princess of Alderaan, and it's about
that came out around Last Jedi, because that's where it actually introduced Holdo, and that's why her character in Last Jedi made sense to people who read the books. And then friend of the NOC, Daniel Jose Older, is part of Project Luminous, and he has a book coming out as well. So just the fact that like Lucasfilm basically said, hey guys, you guys are building the mythology of Star Wars already, because in this Disney era of Star Wars, unlike the past where the novels were just quote unquote expanded universe and were only things that were canon was whatever George Lucas said was canon. Now, like everything that Marvel publishes, everything that Disney publishes, the films, the cartoons, the TV shows, everything is canon.
Yes.
And so they all have to line up. And so the fact that they gave this group, basically carte blanche to say, you can reimagine the history of Star Wars however you want. And that's pretty cool. And as, full disclosure, I'm not a big expanded universe person. I primarily stick to like the live action stuff. Even the animated stuff, I only really watched Rebels and parts of Clone Wars. I'm very excited about just the concept of the High Republic.
I would say it's definitely worth it. It's so fun. Like I've read 2 of Claudia Gray's Star Wars novels. So I read the Princess Leia one, and then the other one that she wrote, if you love romance and you love Star Wars, this is perfect for you. It's called Lost Stars, and it's about a young Black girl, and I think the boy is supposed to be like, he's definitely white, but I think he might be ginger or something like that. And they are childhood friends, and it also goes into like some people who did work for the Empire and served in the Empire, how they are misled about what they're doing. And it kind of plays into the propaganda that people were like, listening to about like the Empire. And so it's about them, and they both go into the Imperial Academy together, but as they kind of grow up and things happen, they end up in opposite sides of the war. One ends up becoming a rebel, one ends up becoming, staying with the Empire. And it's a really good like star-crossed lovers story called Lost Stars. So Claudia Gray is really just like, I'm really excited to read. She has 2 other books that I haven't read yet. Is Bloodlines, which is another book about Leia, and then Master and Apprentice, which is about Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Which I'm like really looking forward to reading those after I finish Into the Dark, which is her High Republic book so far. I'm probably going to read Bloodlines next, because I'm just like, ooh, more Qui-Gon. I love Qui-Gon. So but yeah, there are so many like if you are like me or you are interested in like jumping into Star Wars novels, I would just say you can honestly pick up any one and get into it. The High Republic is perfect just because they are going to be doing a show that takes place eventually in the last 50 years of that era. So I would say the High Republic is perfect. Even though there's a lot of new characters you do get introduced to. It was really fun. I would definitely recommend like having like your daughter check out A Test of Courage.
Sure.
I think it's a really good book.
Yeah.
There's also the Alphabet Squadron. They just released the 3rd book. I have the first 2. I just haven't read them yet. I literally have like a huge pile of Star Wars books that I need to
read. I mean, honestly, like to be fair, like I get a little intimidated knowing there's just so much Star Wars material out there beyond just like I said, everything is canon. So like it can feel overwhelming when there's like all of these novels, all of these comics, even the video games are like, part of the story. So it's just like sometimes I can get a little like, whoa, I don't know where
so
I
much.
am here.
Yeah, because if you are following the story that is the exact story that's introduced in The Light of the Jedi, I think his name is Cavan Scott. He is right now reading the comic issues that are like the in-between stuff going on until his book that he is actually writing, which is part 2 of Light of the Jedi. Cavan Scott writes that, and that's supposed to come out in July, which I've already pre-ordered it. But yeah, so like there literally is so much going on with this new universe, or not the new universe, but this new time period within the Star Wars universe. It's really fun. I like it, and I really love that, especially Into the Dark. You kind of get the perspective, like what people think the Jedi are, and they're like, oh well, they're like monks, or they're like these glorious, like they really do describe like being these glorious knights, and these like, they really do have what we've been told they are like,
right,
is what they are like in this time period. But obviously we're gonna see there's gonna slowly be like them descending into where we get the prequels version of them and just being like not that great actually.
Hard to see the dark side is apparently.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, I'm excited about. I'll put some of the links to those High Republic books in the show description. So if anyone's interested in getting them, they can just click on the links. And full disclosure, there will be Amazon affiliate links, so you'll also be helping out the Nerds of Color if you do click on those links. So that would be appreciated.
Yeah, I pre-ordered all mine off of Amazon. So.
As Star Wars is on a little break because there's not new Star Wars content, definitely check out the books. In the meantime, speaking of new content, there's a big movie coming out this week. It's a movie that's been 3 years in the making. People have been demanding it quite obnoxiously on the internet for quite some time now, but it's here. It's finally here. I'm talking about the Snyder Cut.
Ooh, yes.
It is being released.
I know. I can't believe it actually happened. Now that we're actually like upon like, you know, literally like we're what, 5-6 days away from it being released.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I've seen it.
Oh.
I've seen it. I've seen the entire thing, and not the leak. If you were following the news, apparently HBO accidentally put it in Tom and Jerry for some reason.
First 2 hours, right?
Yeah. I think it was just 1 hour, but either way, if you were hoping to watch some cat and mouse hijinks for your little ones and got, you know, Steppenwolf ripping an Amazon in half instead, Warner Brothers deeply apologizes. But I'll say this too: like, I liked it, and I'm not a big fan of the Snyderverse in general.
Okay.
And it's not necessarily the movies I don't like. I don't like some of the religiosity around Zack Snyder 1, and I don't like a lot of the, like, kind of, for lack of a better word, like, cult mentality of the fan base. Mm-hmm. And so much as, like, what it reminds me of any kind of obsessive fan base of anything, whether it's a movie or a politician or whatever, like, it's to a point where, like, it just sees conspiracy everywhere around every corner. And so, like, all the news over the last week was, like, Warner Brothers is purposefully trying to, like, sabotage the Snyder Cut by leaking it and stuff like that. And, like, sometimes accidents are accidents, right? Like, there's not a conspiracy behind every corner when it comes to Zack Snyder. So, like, the fact that they're even doing this, you know, speaks volumes. So I wouldn't just think, like, you know, Warner Brothers is out to get us kind of thing.
No.
All that said, I actually liked the Snyder Cut, Brittany.
You did?
It's 4 hours.
Okay.
It feels like 4 hours. But it doesn't feel like 4 hours as well. Like, it's, you know, have you seen the meme where it's like, you know, 4 hour movie? Hell no. 10-hour binge? Sure. You know?
Yeah.
I think if you approach it that way and think you're binging 6 installments of a Justice League series, it doesn't feel that long, you know? Because it's actually divided into chapters. Part of me liked it in that I could pause when the screen turned black and, like, go to the bathroom or get a snack or take a nap and then come back to it, you know, like a TV show. So that was kind of cool. As a narrative, like a film cinematic narrative, it's a little choppy. But that's what I mean. Like, if you just approach it as a 6-part miniseries, which it almost was. When they announced it last year, they said it was going to be released in installments. I kind of wish they did, in a way, because it would have been interesting to see how that played out. Like, you know, but at the same time, like, we know the story. It's essentially the same story that we saw 3 years ago. It's rearranged differently. There are beats that are definitely different. It's much better than the Joss Whedon version. I will say that.
Okay. That's good to know. It was funny because we actually did a DC TV Classics episode of us talking about it. And I had got to see the movie with Nick, who was one of our co-hosts then. And
that's Nick of Team Star Kid.
Yes, Nick Lang of Team Star Kid, who, if you guys know, worked with Darren Criss and all that good stuff.
I don't remember what we said about Justice League on the DC TV Classics podcast.
I think we all were in agreement that it was just, like, not that great. I remember saying, like, both me and Nick just kept looking at each other at certain parts, like, this is just, like, what is this? But I've always stood by, even though, like, I'm just not a fan of Zack Snyder's work in general, like, not just this recent set of DC movies. Like, I'm just not a fan of his work. But yeah, it always felt like it was two different movies. And that's why, even though I was very like, I don't care if I personally watch the new version, but I just feel like he should have got to do his version, because that was just not his movie.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, the fact that they put Zack Snyder's name on the version that came out in theaters is a disservice to Snyder, because it is so wildly different. I actually went back and rewatched the theatrical cut after watching the Snyder cut, and it is night and day different. The biggest difference is what they did to Ray Fisher. And, you know, I was a little skeptical, to be honest, for the last few weeks about... I'm not skeptical about Ray's complaints about, like, racism and inappropriateness on the set of Justice League. All the stories of Joss Whedon are probably true, and I stand by all of that. What I was a little skeptical is just how much different could it have been, because to be fair, I thought Cyborg's story in the Joss Whedon version was probably one of the best parts of the Joss Whedon version, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Ray Fisher's really good as Cyborg, his pathos, and that's where like that kind of pathos fits in a DC movie, you know, where sometimes I get a little like annoyed by like the over seriousness of the DC films, but Cyborg's story was very much, you know, emotional and grounded, and I really liked it in the original version. Seeing the actual original version, seeing him in the Snyder Cut, oh my god, Ray Fisher deserves a Cyborg film, or at the very least, he deserves to continue playing this character because he's so good at it. And it's a shame that, you know, he's burned these bridges with DC. I think if DC should, you know, extend grace to Ray for what he went through and allow him to at least continue the character, if not the Flash movie, in some other capacity. I don't know that Ray even wants that, to be honest, because I know he said as long as Walter Hamada is the president of DC Films, he doesn't want to work for them. But still,
yeah,
the Cyborg story and Ray Fisher's performance is one of the highlights of the Snyder Cut. And they were in line when they were saying that, like, you know, you'll see he's the emotional core of the film. And, you know, I kind of feel bad now that I was skeptical of, like, how bad could it be? But it was, it's really bad. Like, just how much they took away from. He basically reshot all of his scenes for Joss Whedon.
That's so, it's frustrating because, like, you know, we know that it's harder for actors of color to just, like, you know, get certain chances to, one, show off their talent, and also be able to, like, play, you know, characters like this, and getting the proper screen time and all of that. And then for it to find out, like, actually, you know, Zack Snyder was doing no pun intended, but like doing justice by him and by casting Ray, and then to like hear that how much Josh took away, and top of Josh being like just toxic person to work with, that makes it all so much worse, that like this is what Josh Whedon did. And that he's also been like toxic and doing this for years, and he likes to take out his personal feelings towards actors on the characters they play. And so, you know, like we saw that with Charisma Carpenter's character. Even with Spike, like he didn't like Spike for whatever reason. He didn't like he didn't like the actor who played him. And he purposely would like write certain storylines to make Spike seem a little bit more creepy or weird, or like kind of like
that sounds like Josh projecting almost, right?
Yeah. I think those were things that like he was doing it to take it out on the actor, to try to make people like have a bad point of view of him. And I'm just like, why can't you if you don't like the actor, even if they haven't really done anything wrong, just fire them instead of like doing this to them. Like, I don't know, that was just, it's just, I hope, really, honestly, I hate to say it, I hope Josh Whedon never works again.
Well, you know, it may get to that point. He may end up like Kevin Spacey or something, right? Like, just never work again. Well, and, you know, another bit of news that we neglected to mention at the top of the show, Kiersey Clemons, who was cast as Iris in the Snyder Cut, all her scenes were cut out. She's been recast in the Flashpoint movie, so that's, you know, that's kind of cool that they're bringing her back. Billy Crudup is not coming back as Henry Allen, Barry's father, though. That's unfortunate. But that scene is restored. So I will say one thing about the Snyder Cut that is, you know, your mileage may vary, is that he did restore a lot of the scenes that were cut out. And some of these scenes had been floating on the internet for the last few years as well. So, like, everyone's seen the scene where Barry breaks through the glass and saves Iris. The scene plays, you know, really well. It's actually really funny. And I know one of the things that Zack gets dinged for is like his lack of humor. I think, like, you know, one of the reasons I like Justice League so much is that he allows his characters to be humorous. He allows them to be human, right? Like, I tweeted out a whole Twitter thread about the difference between the MCU and the DCEU. I'll link to the thread in the show notes as well. But basically, I think the reason why people, the general audience, can't hook into the DC characters the way they hook into the Marvel characters is that the way the DC characters are presented are as symbols. They're not people. There's nothing human about these characters. Whereas in the Marvel films, we cling to not the Captain America, the Iron Man, but we cling to Chris Evans specifically as Steve Rogers and Robert
Yes.
Downey specifically as Tony Stark, right? Like
Mhm.
their interpretations is what draws the, like what we said about Wanda and Vision earlier, right?
Mhm.
The actors' performances and the humanity they bring to the characters is what draws the broader audience in. Whereas with the DC characters, it's very much like the Superman symbol versus the Batman symbol and the Wonder Woman symbol. They're all metaphors for something else. They're not
Yeah.
actually, and Zack Snyder's not a subtle filmmaker. He's like, Man of Steel, here's my Christ metaphor over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And that's, but I think, if you what I like about Justice League is that Snyder lets his characters be humorous. Like there's actual banter between Diana and Bruce that feels natural and not that like weird shit that's in the Whedon cut, right? Like,
yeah.
There's more organic, natural banter between Wonder Woman and Batman. No Wonder Bat, but there's some.
You know me, I'm a Wonder Bat shipper.
There's a great scene where like Diana's making tea, and Alfred is like, just like boiling under his skin because like it's his job to make tea, and Diana's over here doing it, and he's just like, "Oh, can you stir it a little? Don't put the water in yet." It's really kind of humorous, and that's the kind of thing that I miss from most Zack Snyder films.
Yeah,
like just kind of humanity in the characters, and he lets that come out in this, and I really appreciate it.
I think that's exactly what it is, because I don't have a problem with films being dark and gritty and like having a more serious tone or like dismal look on the world. Like I that stuff I don't mind. Like I absolutely love the movie The Lighthouse. That movie is just like that movie is a very like
the Robert Pattinson Willem Dafoe movie.
Yes, have you seen it?
I haven't. It's on my to watch list. So there's so many.
Watch it. It's definitely a very wild movie. It's dark and there are moments that are funny, but it has humanity to it, and I think that's the difference. I think, as you pointed out, is his movies lack this sense of humanity that makes it hard to connect. Versus, it's like you said, these are very cool and big ththings that he does sometimes. Like he does have cool moments. I'm not gonna like be a complete hater and be like, oh.
Well, that's his thing though, right? Like, and that's his strength is the visual style.
Yeah,
and he's able to like recreate the panels of a comic book in cinematic form, and no one, even his haters, I think, don't deny that. I think it's a skill of like storytelling and like I said, getting into the humanity of the characters that seems lacking. But again, I feel like he gets that in Justice League. There are a lot of examples of just that kind of like those human moments, like and we see this in the theatrical cut. But like Barry and Bruce's first meeting, that was my favorite scene from the trailer. And that's the one that really drew me out when I was watching the theater, because those are where the reshoots are so obvious. Like Ezra Miller's like hair doesn't even look the same. He's standing at a different angle. The background's clearly like green screen.
I hate it. Like I hate when like when you were watching it, you could tell like you said, like Ben Affleck doesn't look as in shape as he was.
Right, yeah, because like he came back 6 months later, he's a little pinker, a little rounder than he was when he was
and just like originally. The different, and also I don't know if anyone noticed, but I did that. Like Diana's hair, it has more volume in certain scenes and other scenes. Like it's like,
well, because that's the thing that pisses me off is like Whedon doesn't even try to match, because usually when you do reshoot, and to be fair, Snyder does some reshoots for the Snyder Cut. Like there's a whole sequence that he adds towards the end of the film that wasn't in his original Snyder Cut, and but at least his film looks tonally consistent throughout. Like the color grading is the same.
Yeah,
even the shots that are reshot for this particular cut aren't obvious. The only thing, and I will say the one thing that I didn't like about the Snyder Cut is that I don't like that it's rated R, because the R rating is clearly like after the fact. Like there's no reason it has to be rated R. But all the blood, all the F-bombs were clearly added in after the fact to make it rated R. You know what I mean? Like there's no story reason it should be rated R, but like, let me add some CG blood and some fucks here and there just to get that R rating. And that's a little cheap to me. Like it doesn't earn its R rating.
That I don't like, when it's rated R just for like stuff that it doesn't need to be. When you were telling a story that really is a little bit more mature than what probably kids can handle, then yes, I understand that.
Right.
But
I mean, like I always bitch about like rated R superhero stuff, but like my favorite movie is Birds of Prey, which is a hard R and earns the R.
Oh yeah.
But this movie, like, there's no, like, all the blood in it is like there's no reason it needs to be there. And then like there's a couple scenes where clearly like a lot of the fucks in the movie were ADR'd. You can tell because like you don't actually see like people use like actually say it. Like there's the scene when the Ramsay Bolton's father takes all those kids hostage at the beginning that Wonder Woman saves. You can tell like his henchman in the background, like, shut the fuck up, like was 80-yard after the fact.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, they're definitely. I don't even remember them shouting something like that.
Yeah, they don't, because they don't, right? Like then there's no need to. Again, it's just like let me be edgy, let me be cool, and drop a fuck bomb here and there. You know?
Yeah, and that's to me what I feel like a lot of Zack Snyder's films are in general. Is like he's doing the hard, dark, edgy stuff to just look edgy, but there's no, like you said, humanity behind it. That's one of the reasons why I don't connect with his films. Right. You know, and I've had people like, especially when I kind of say like, well, I prefer Marvel better, they automatically go like, oh, well, it's because you don't like deep storytelling, right, or you don't like stories that are dark. And I'm like, no, I love stories that are dark. Like, you know, I enjoy stories that are dark and depressing and sad. Like Donnie Darko is one of my favorite things, and that's not a very uplifting film.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing. Like, it thinks it's more profound than it is. And so where I am, and I don't want to sound like I'm hating, because I think I the view I've taken now over the few years is that, you know, I've come to appreciate not just the Snyder films, I think all the DC films in history, because like I think we as fans feel a sense of ownership over all of these things, right? And I've learned in my old age to kind of let go and allow people's interpretations to kind of like be what they are. And I'd said this on the podcast last year, like I have a renewed, and you'll like to hear this, Brittany, I have a renewed appreciation for the Schumacher films because of that. Right? Like because I think the thing for me is that, you know, I think where I used to feel kind of uneasy about like the Snyder films was that thinking that this is going to be the only interpretation of DC characters for the next 10, 20 years.
No.
Didn't direction where like they're just going to let directors do whatever they want. Is like, okay, that's cool. Then if that's the case, if like all of these things exist, that we can have a Robert Pattinson Batman next to a Ben Affleck Batman, next to a Michael Keaton Batman, that's cool. Like let them do whatever. We can have Tyler Hoechlin. We can have Tyler Hoechlin and Henry Cavill and, you know, Ta-Nehisi Coates Superman stories. Like they can all coexist in the same multiverse.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, that's why I say, like, a lot of people are like, well, like you already know these characters, so why aren't you connecting with them, in particular in like in terms of Snyderverse? And it's like we said, there's a lack of humanity there. So when there is that lack of humanity, even if they are playing characters we've seen before, it's hard to connect to those characters when you don't feel their humanity. And that's why some people don't like them, and they're just like, you know, and that's something that people need to realize. When you have different writers and directors and actors playing these characters, like it's going to change each version and how you connect with them and who you connect with more or less. And it's a matter of which character speaks more humanity to you. Yeah. But if you're someone who's more into big symbols and, you know, not necessarily actually connecting on more human level, yeah, you are going to prefer Zack Snyder's work, and that's okay. Yeah. But it's, you know, it's not my personal cup of tea. But I do think there are things that Zack does that he does. I think he is great in terms of picking his actors.
Oh yeah, his casting is great.
Yes, I think he is really great at casting, and whoever his casting, you know, partner is, like, they do a really good job. Because I really live by that. Henry Cavill is probably one of the best castings for Superman ever. I just feel like we haven't got to see him shine as Superman, unfortunately.
No, and he's actually like it was so great to see Henry Cavill with like a regular face in this movie. Yes. Because like his face is very perfect, and the fact that you fuck it up in a Justice League movie is unforgivable.
I just feel like they could have let him have the beard. Like I would have been
It's
fine
just
with
the thing
Superman
is, it's
with the beard.
so obvious. Like, it's not even good. That's what I mean. Like, the thing with Whedon is, like, there was no effort. You know, I always tell my daughter, if you get, like, a hard-earned C, I'm not going to be mad at you, right? Like, a hard-earned C is better than an easy A, because at least you tried.
Yeah, exactly.
And, like, Whedon didn't even try. Like, there's... if you go back, again, seriously, if you watch the theatrical cut after watching the Snyder Cut, it's actually worse, you know, in hindsight, because it's just like, you know, you knew it was bad at the time, but now seeing, like, just how much, you know, because, again, Snyder, one thing you can't say about Snyder is that he puts effort into his movies. And then Whedon just, like, he half-asses it. And that's so obvious when you watch, like, the reshoots and, you know, like, the goofy acting. Like, there's bad acting, but then there's goofy acting. And all of, like, Whedon's scenes is, like, goofy acting. Like, the criminal that Batman stops at the beginning of the movie. Or, like, the news anchor who, like, shows the woman who's complaining about her husband getting abducted. Martha and Lois at the Daily Planet. Like, all of that is just bad, you know? And none of that exists in the Snyder Cut, and it's better for it. The other thing, speaking of half-ass, is the music is so much better for the most part in the Snyder Cut, because they brought back Junkie XL to revisit the thematic, you know, motifs of the other Snyder movies. So, like, the Man of Steel theme is kind of prominent. There's a great triumphant version of the Man of Steel theme at the end of the movie during, like, the battle, which is perfect. Like, I got chills, like, when they kick into, like, da, da, like the trailer music from Man of Steel. It's so good. And there's, like, a triumphant version of that at the end. I will say I wasn't a fan of, like, this. There's this weird vocalizing whenever the Themyscirans show up, especially Wonder Woman. So, like, her theme becomes, like, this weird, like, vocalizing.
Is it, like, weird Gregorian chant?
Kind of, not Gregorian. It's like, it's a female voice, but it's just like, you know, every time the Themyscirans show up. And it's weird. It takes some getting used to, especially because you're expecting, like, the electric cello that's her theme. And it kicks in once in a while, but most of the time it's this weird, you know, chanting. And there's a really weird scene at the beginning when Aquaman swims away from that fisherman village that he's at the beginning. Like, there are these blonde, like, Nordic women who are just, like, they start singing, and it's really weird. Like, they sound like Bjork, and, like, I normally like Bjork, but it's, like, a weird Bjork song that they're singing. It's weird, but, you know, A for effort, I guess, right?
A for effort. Is it like Eurovision?
Yeah, it's very much like Eurovision. And then she sniffs Aquaman's sweater, and you see it coming. You know she's gonna sniff the sweater, and you're like, "Don't sniff the don't." Oh, she sniffs the sweater.
Oh no. Well,
again, Zack's not the most.
Ding dong.
Again, Zack's not the most subtle filmmaker. But you know, I liked it a lot. It's definitely a different experience. There, at the same time, like, the 4-hour version that we're getting could definitely be 2.5 hours and still be a great film. Like, there's a lot of, like, fat that could have been cut that he adds in, you know, just because he can. Like, why not, right? Like, this is my...
I mean, they gave him the budget to
do
it,
it's like, I don't need to cut it down. I'm like, just here's everything. Like,
I'm sorry to talk about Game of Thrones real quick, but HBO gave them a huge budget to do more episodes, and you know what they said? They said no. And I like that, even though that I may not like Zack, that he took the opportunity and said, I'm going to milk it. So
yeah, for sure.
Props to Zack actually doing something that the Game of Thrones people should have done.
Exactly. No, for real. I mean, it's all on screen. Like, it feels, everything feels finished. But at the same time, like, there's maybe 3 too many Steppenwolf conversations with, like, mother box versions of Apocalypse, you know, like, I could have done without. Like, I don't really need to know Steppenwolf's motivation. Like, it's a little, like, you did it once, it's cool, and then, like, the second and the third and the fourth time we hear Steppenwolf talking to, like, the mother boxes, it's a little like, okay, you could have cut this out. Darkseid's fine. Like, I don't get the hype about Darkseid. He's not as compelling as, you know, no, please don't direct any hate mail. He's not as compelling as Thanos. But that's because, again, Thanos is an actual character. Darkseid is not a character.
Yeah, movie. And I think that's, like, I I understand if you were someone who has read all the comics and you have like that background info and like, you know, you're like, oh, I really get what's going on here. That's fine for you, but you have to realize other people who are coming into this brand new and don't, or even people who have read comics but understand that this is a different medium and this is a different form of storytelling.
Yeah, you got to
You
tell
have to
them
give
why
me,
they should care.
you got to, yes, exactly. You got to tell me why I should care. And that's how I felt about definitely for sure his the recent DC movies because I know he did Watchmen, which I don't think that's a part of.
It's not a part of the universe, but it's definitely a DC film. That it's the reason he got Superman. You know.
Yeah. So like, but that's the thing. It's like he has not given me a reason to care about the characters that he's presented, which I think is the issue. Is it's not whether or not I've known these characters. It's just like he hasn't given me a reason to care about them.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the issue, and that's what he doesn't do versus what Marvel does. Is they give you reasons why you care about these characters and why people are so upset.
And I think the difference too, and I've said this for a long time, Marvel's approach to their movies is, and they said what was great is they said this in Assembled. I think Paul Bettany says it. The Marvel movies are essentially TV.
Yes.
Right. So like, you know, because you think of things like shipping and all that stuff, like that's TV fandom because you're with these characters for 20 episodes, 30 episodes, 40 episodes, and like the Marvel movies, if you think about it, is really like 25 episodes of, you know, the adventures of the Avengers, you know.
Yeah, that's literally what Paul Bettany says that too, and he says, and then we get our own little actual
like spin-off
and like focusing on our characters, and they develop.
But that's the thing, like, right, you know? TV is about character. TV is about developing storylines and character arcs over a long period of time. That's why you feel such an attachment to like Grant Gustin's Barry Allen more than Ezra Miller. As great as Ezra Miller is as Flash, there's not the connection that you have with Grant Gustin because you've been with Grant Gustin for like 500 episodes.
Yeah, and that's what I really wish people understood about why, for me, like Zack doesn't do it for him, is because he doesn't give me reason to care other than, well, you watch the older Batman movies and TV shows and read the comics, so you should care because this is Batman.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, but this is a new Batman, so why do I care about this particular Batman?
And that's the thread that I responded to. Brian Edward Hill had a great thread on Twitter talking about that. Like, so much of Zack Snyder's films are about the meta text. Like, you have to know who these characters already are to get it. And if you do, and I think that's true for a lot of fans, like, you have the background knowledge, the prior knowledge of who Batman is and his Superman is and Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
That you don't need it necessarily, and that's why they see the genius in it. Whereas, like, again, the general audience, they may know who these characters are as symbols, but to care about them, there's a reason why we care about Christian Bale's Batman more than Ben Affleck's Batman. Because he was developed over a series of films. Whereas Ben Affleck was dropped. And, you know, in retrospect, I kind of like Ben. I feel like I've spent more time with Ben Affleck's Batman over the years, where now I kind of get who his Batman is. But in 2016, I had no idea who his Batman was supposed to be.
No, exactly. You know? I felt very like I like Ben Affleck, and I think he looks great, and he would be a great Bruce if you made me care about him. Like, you're dropping me into this story where, like, he, you know, has already been Batman for some time, and he...
Yeah, which was my argument, is like, why couldn't he been Christian Bale? Like, his character, where the Batman character is in Batman vs. Superman is exactly where Christian Bale was when he finishes the Dark Knight trilogy, like basically a burnt out Batman. So
and
if you wanted to have that same kind of effect that like the Marvel movies give you, you bring back Christian Bale so that the audience has the background knowledge of like who this Batman is and why he hates Superman. So yeah, I mean, I don't want to get onto a whole, like, this is why Zack sucks, because I really liked the Snyder Cut, and it's my favorite of the three. It's now as a trilogy, if you think of it as, like, Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, Zack Snyder's Justice League as a trilogy, it really works, and I apologize to all the Snyder fans I used to make fun of. I get it now. I see why. I will eat my crow, and I'll eat my Russell Crowe as Jor-El, and bow down to the cult of Snyder. No, but seriously, I really liked it. I will say one more thing. The nightmare scene at the end of the movie where he revisits his like post-apocalyptic Mad Max future. In the trailers where we see Jared Leto's Joker. Spoiler alert if you don't care. If you do care, stop the podcast here. That whole "we live in a society" line in the trailer, turns out it was really just a troll. Joker doesn't say it in the film. And part of me made me feel better because like at the time we talked about this on the podcast. It was like, did they think that like there's like actual sincerity behind the "we live in a society" meme, or were they just trolling people? And it turns out they're just trolling people because Joker doesn't say it in the movie.
All right, that's good to know.
Yeah, it made me feel better because like I worry sometimes with Snyder, like, does he get it or does he actually think that like that's what's scary about like a lot of like 4chan incels who idolize the Joker. It's almost like, do they really think the Joker's like an appropriate worldview?
I don't know, but
so it turns out like I don't think he believes that, so that's
good. That's good. I think that there are like I've said, there are positives to things that Zack does as a filmmaker. I did say on Twitter that I wasn't gonna watch,
but I changed your mind.
You changed my mind, and I feel like as being a part of this podcast, I don't want to be the only person who like, especially when I actually have access to it. It'd be different if I didn't have access to HBO Max, but I do have access to it.
Yeah, it's worth a watch. Like I said, think of it as. Don't think of it as like a 4-hour movie. Think of it as like a 6-hour binge. Think of it as a 6-episode binge, and then you'll be fine. But
I probably won't tweet about it. I will save all of my thoughts and feelings for when we actually do the podcast, just so then like it's saved for here, and
Well, that's a good tease for next week. So look, tune in next week, and we'll see what Britney and the rest of the fellas think about not only Justice League, but Falcon Winter Soldier. So that's the tease for next week.
I'm really already obviously excited for Falcon Winter Soldier. I can't wait. I'm really just excited for the next several Marvel shows. Like I talked about last week, I'm very excited for Miss Marvel. That is a very near and dear character to me, so I can't wait.
Yeah, so that's the tease for next week. In the meantime, Brittany, how can people find you on the internet?
You can find my personal Twitter and all that good stuff at Hi Brittany Monet, which I tweet all kinds of wild, crazy stuff. Sometimes it's comic book stuff, and then sometimes it's just thirst tweets and other things. And then you can also follow my other podcast, which is the Black Lightning Podcast, at BL_podcast. I just honestly recorded an episode for Black Lightning Podcast before doing this podcast today. So a lot of nerd stuff for me going on, and
you are queen nerd.
I try.
You can find me on Twitter at @TheRealChow, _real_Chow. Follow the Nerds of Color at the Nerds of Color. Go to hardknockmedia.com to find this and all of the podcasts in the Hard Knock Network. Subscribe and download on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get podcasts. Please give us a rating and review if you do. Also, smash that subscribe button on youtube.com/nerdsofcolor, where you can find these podcasts as well as great videos that Jamal and Patrick and Laura and all of the Nerds of Color crew put together for the YouTube channel. Please give us a like and subscribe there as well. Support us on Patreon and GoFundMe. Buy merch at TeePublic. And until next time, stay safe, everybody. Pop culture with a different perspective. Watch it on your screen, hit play, so check this. This is the Hard Knock life, but not the chicken kind. More like the people in